Hello, welcome back to the Mary Tyler Moore, where today we're going to learn more about the city's past and its history. Not just folklore, but actually recorded history. Because my cities are far from perfect. And I know in the past I've mentioned how in the Tyler Moore it's a utopic society where bad things don't happen, but it is always impossible to avoid all bad things, balance-wise. You have to take the bitter with the sweet, so the song goes. But this ordeal that we will be talking about today is the Anishinaabe University saga. This ordeal stems from a time when I decided to create a small university or a small community college of placing random education buildings and giving it an official university district so it would have one unified name. Seemed like a simple idea to me at the time. But I did not realize that it would cause a glitch in the game's mechanics, and somehow it triggered a crime wave that decimated half of the Tyler Moore's entire population. What happened is the crime wave came, everybody abandoned their homes and fled the city, and the population dried up, which led to everything being unable to operate because I only had half the population. It was a messy situation. It took quite some time to figure out what the cause of the problem was in the first place, because I did not realize the crime wave was really anything for quite some time. I just thought, there is some crime happening in this, one corner of the county. I need to add another police station here. Increased traffic suddenly. Maybe there's the cop cars can't get through. That was also a problem. The increased traffic caused the police stations to not be able to service areas very well either. So there were areas where I began placing like 4 police stations in one neighborhood because I thought this was going to hopefully work finally. No, it didn't. The problem persisted, and eventually I discovered it was this glitch. So that is the technical background of what actually happened in my game here, and what affected the data and statistics of the population in my city. But it was such a significant event in the Tyler Moore's history, I knew it needed somehow to be part of the canon of the Moore. So here is that story. As the city of Sophia grew, it amalgamated with the town of Stanton, which we covered in the past episode all about Stanton. And the city grew and developed out like a carpet. And on the edge of this new development, they decided they needed to reserve some space for a future community college that would be required as the population was increasing in this area. But it did not need to be, they did not reserve enough space for a major institution, just a small little community college. Out of goodwill and reverence, the college's board, which was made up of a regional body located in the national capital, far outside of the Tyler Moore, they decided, again out of goodwill and reverence, to call the school Anishinaabe College for the people who originally lived on that land and hundreds of years before had been pushed away, and here in the Tyler Moore, people regard it as a genocide, to push them off their land and take it for the settlers. This caused a great deal of contention, as you can imagine, and we know in real life this happens. But here in the Tyler Moor, they worked very hard to solve the issues between these two sides, and it eventually today in the Tyler Moor comes to the point where there are friendly relations between the indigenous communities and the settler communities in the region. They all live integratedly together. This is why, one of the reasons why I like to say nothing bad ever happens in the Tyler Moor. But in this case, it quickly became apparent that this was a terrible faux pas on the part of the college's board. It was, at first, it was just sort of batted away by the indigenous community as being distasteful. They were a little insulted by it. It was no biggie, really. Unfortunately, mostly because they're used to this kind of behavior. And they've become conditioned to reacting calmly to people who don't take the time to understand their issues and conflicts and think they're doing the right thing and maybe make a nice gesture, but maybe end up making things worse. But they just kind of brushed it off. At worst, they were unenthusiastic about having a college named for their people. This was because this is going to be a college that is teaching a Western European pedagogy in Eurocentric subjects for the most part, on lands that were still unceded and disputed. This was why it irked them. But as I mentioned, they didn't really ruffle feathers about it. However, actions and consequences. The unenthusiastic reception was quickly criticized by a small but very vocal group of a few, you know who you are, who publicly ridiculed the indigenous community and claimed they were not grateful enough for, quote, all the support they get from the national government. Now, in the Tyler Moor, the indigenous community is only about 14%, but including their allies and supporters, it's more like 93%. And the indigenous community, they were not happy about the vitriol that this little group was spewing into the media, but their allies, they were downright mad. They were not used to composing themselves gracefully to navigate these kinds of situations, as the indigenous communities were used to having to do, and they became very angry. It began with a few different uprisings across the city, mostly teenagers just keying cars and covering windshields with shaving cream. But it very quickly escalated to rocks going through the windows of homes and cars and businesses all across the cities, the entire Tyler Moor. The police, who rarely need to be deployed for anything more than parade crowd control or sometimes handing out free water on days that they have heat warnings, they had to respond. So they responded with just helmets and shields alone. No weapons, no tear gas, no water cannons, no threats, just hide behind the shield and try to contain the crowd in a space where they won't damage the rest of the city. Now, this handling of the situation was thought to be as non-confrontational as the police could be, but it really created an ugly scene that everybody had broadcast on their TVs, that they were glued to watch the situation as it unfolded. This really deeply bothered the people of the Tyler Moor to see that there was a police standoff in their beloved Tyler Moor because of this small group of people with backwards opinions who created a very terrible situation. And that small group of people were not even residents of the Tyler Moor. They were off in the national capital. And because of them, this reality in the Tyler Moor was just too overwhelming. With the people so deeply disturbed, shockwaves went through the community, and things boiled to a fever pitch. Now, at this point, the indigenous community was just, they were so scared and so worried about everything so quickly unraveling. And they didn't even really have anything to do with it, but it was their name that was written all over it. And these other people were creating this horrible situation. So they came together, all the indigenous communities in the region came together and made up an offer to help calm the tensions. They proposed a formal treaty with only the following 3 conditions. 1, that the national government formally recognize in law that the lands the college sits on belong to the Anishinaabe people. 2, that the Anishinaabe people welcome the settlers to operate their school on the lands and teach whatever they wish in whatever pedagogical style that they deem most effective. So they acknowledge these people are here, they're willing to share the space with them, they're willing to let them have an educational institution and teach it in their way. They don't really want to care about it. Just, they already didn't get to live on that land anymore anyway. Just let's have peace. Let's just bring this to a close. And that the 3rd condition, the school can be named whatever the college board desires. It will have no effect on the relations between the indigenous peoples and the national government, for better or worse, keeping it as neutral as possible. If you want to still name it Anishinaabe College, go ahead. We're not going to take it as a compliment or as a gift. We're not going to take it as an insult. We're not going to take it in any way. We're just going to pass by and move on so we don't have these riots completely destroying lives and families and an entire community. That was all they asked for. Just basically peace and calm to return to the Tyler Moor, and a formal land acknowledgement stating that this was their land, always has been. They're just being accommodating to these people who have more recently arrived. And because they wish to live in peace with their new neighbors rather than creating a terrible conflict. Now, this very simple document could have diffused the bomb of these terrible riots across the Tyler Moor. But before the national government even had a chance to fully analyze and meet and come to a consensus and respond to the offer of this formal treaty, the leader of this little, small group of irritants decided to use the nuclear option and outrageously claimed that the indigenous community was out of line for demanding recognition of the land, and that the college board was just trying to be nice, and that it would be better if the indigenous community would pledge fealty to the national government And he also proposed that the small community college should instead become a major university and be named after him instead, because he pays his taxes, when he famously did hard time for tax evasion 30 years before. You can imagine how that went over. Pandemonium ensued. Highways and station platforms heading out of the Tyler Moor were flooded with people scared and worried and fleeing the violence spreading through the streets. No one was safe in their home. No one was safe on the street. It was just panic and mayhem everywhere. It came to the point that the Rolling Stones publicly decried the use of their song Satisfaction, which was being used as an anthem from some of the rioters and looters, as it was commonly being blared on a loop throughout the city over the sounds of breaking glass and sirens. Finally, a third-party arbitrator from Norway, Greta Haugen, joined an Indigenous Advisory Council that was quickly formed to bring an expedient solution to the completely out-of-hand situation. The council proposed the following. 1. The school be upgraded from a community college to a major university. 2. The land the university is on officially belongs to the Indigenous community and will be formally recognized as such by the national government in perpetuity. 3. The university will be named as the Anishinaabe community sees fit. 4. The university will be funded in total for the duration of its existence by the national government, yet will be operated entirely and solely by the Anishinaabe community. Article A. Ownership and operation of the university cannot be transferred away from the Anishinaabe community, not by sale nor force. Article B. Pedagogy and subject matter taught is entirely under the direction of the Anishinaabe community. Article C. All courses, programs, diplomas, and degrees are fully accredited by the National Post-Secondary Accreditation Institute, or NPSI. The national government, having been on the side supporting the Indigenous communities in the first place, quickly jumped to accept and ratify what officially became known as the Anishinaabe University Accord, a copy of which is permanently on display under glass in the university's main administration building. So, when you go to the registrar's office upset because you've been booted out of an overcrowded class, you're reminded of more important things to be grateful for before you take your temper out on the people who had no control over your predicament. Anishinaabe University was founded the following week, and a few weeks into their first semester, the leader of that very vocal group of irritants took a very high-security tour of the facilities, which went pleasantly and uneventful. He was impressed with the programs and stated he was glad things worked out the way they did. He then presented the university's board with a taxidermized white dove bobblehead with an olive branch in its beak as a gift, citing how he knew Indigenous people had a thing for animals being used completely after being killed. So he thought they'd get a kick out of this, which caused many people to hold their foreheads in disbelief, but otherwise didn't cause much controversy. Today, Anishinaabe University is one of 3 major universities in the Tyler Moor and serves the greater community as a specialized school that the region is grateful and very proud to have, where anyone can take courses in Anishinaabe history, folklore, language, artistry, including beading and ribbon skirt weaving, cuisine, sport, hunting technique, and subsistence survival courses. Post-secondary education is universally free in the Tyler Moor. Registration policies do prioritize Indigenous applicants over non-Indigenous applicants, but there is more than enough room for thousands of non-Indigenous students to join in the learning. So what are you waiting for? Register for classes today. Thank you for joining me for this very important history lesson in the Tyler Moor's past. And I think a pretty suitable explanation for a massive crime wave. I think if there's a reason for people to be rioting and looting in the streets, it had better be a pretty darn good reason. But as we learned, this was not the viewpoint of the Indigenous community either. Something to consider before you think you're helping someone. Make sure from that someone that you're actually going to be helping them before you do it. Until next time, I hope you take care. Enjoy more of the Tyler Moor. Maybe go for another run down the Raven Slope at the on Mount Michoud on a ski holiday. And I will hopefully see you again very soon for another time, either here in the merry Tyler Moor or even over in the Tyler Moor East. Take care, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.